basically, let's say if we take this character here, you can, let's move to a move topological. I'll show you. This is the next step, is just to select the move topological brush. I'll show you why in a second. But basically, you can take the document color and you can set it to a black color. And then you can click on flat. I'll show you what that is. Sometimes this annoying thing is you have to sort of move things around and cover the entire screen. But if you go to render, this flat icon, that's what I have here, or that switch. So you can switch between preview, which is what you see, and flat. So flat gives you a shadeless version of the mesh. So make sure that the polyframe, the polypaint is off as well, just in case you have some polypaint. But basically, yeah, you can just go to this preview and flat, and the flat allows you to see the silhouette of the character. So this is really powerful. Now, when you select the move topological, this brush respects the topology of the different objects. So right now we have a single object, but each object has its own polygroup, and it's a self-contained object. So it is not connected to anything else. So selecting the move topological allows you to fill in the gaps. So for instance, I can sort of see that this one right here. So this piece, maybe I'm going to bring in my Epic Pen so that you kind of see what at least I can explain what I'm seeing, and hopefully that makes sense. So that you understand the next set of actions, you understand why I'm doing that. So I can see that this could be my sort of beak, or like the creature has like a split jaw open. So I might need to get rid of all that, right? And that's part of the design. So I can see that sort of beak with open jaw creature. Maybe I have the eyes here. I don't know. We'll try that. So somewhere here, I might have the eyes, and the rest is kind of like a fleshy leather, or it could be feathers or something, and we'll figure out the rest, right? But that's kind of like what I'm seeing, right? So once you identified the creature or the things that you can push and pull, that's when you start to look at the references that you have and say, okay, that sort of reminds me of like this sort of like jaw opening and those panels. So how can I take this to the next level? So I'm going to start sort of using the move topological. Also, if you press the Alt key, you can push towards the camera. So I use that quite a bit. And also, this is just a personal preference. In the curve here under the brush palette, I like to enable AccuCurve so that you get more of a pointy effect. So I'm going to use that to give it a bit more shape and really push that idea that I can already see. And I'm also going to try to fill in some gaps, right? So all I'm doing here is, like I said, I already have a rough vision of what this creature might be going. But what I'm trying to really do is simplify the read. So I don't want to have a bunch of lines that has a lot of contrast that doesn't really go anywhere. I want to make sure that whatever I do, it feels intentional. So all of those pieces can go, maybe. So it's kind of like a filtering down or refining. When I say refining, I mean you leave whatever works, and whatever doesn't work, don't try to push it. Just, you can remove it. Or let's say if this bead right here, it kind of looks like a clavicle, but if it doesn't work, I just push it in and that's it, right? So that's what I'm trying to do, like figuring out what are the pieces from that chaotic sort of exercise that work. So maybe this could be part of the trapezius, right? So like a very thin one. And this could be part of some kind of wings, actually. So if we go, now that I have sort of defined the species, or the kind of like the thing that I'm trying to do, some kind of bird, everything else that I make a decision in terms of what I'm leaving or removing, it sort of fits within that idea what the design should be. So, those scapulas might be for that sort of wings. It's going to push this out as well. And look at it, look at the creature from all different angles. I guess the first step within this step of refining it is just to clear the gaps that you don't really need. That's kind of like the main thing that I'm doing. So see, for example, this one, I think I'm going to push that in. I don't need that. And you can also isolate things, hold Control and Shift and access them. And you can smooth that like so, but it doesn't get too crazy. But don't worry about the topology. Don't worry about anything else. This is going to be completely changed, believe me. Sometimes when you have, let's say, a gap like this in the middle, this is another tip, and they're not kind of like not touching, you can use inflate. So I'm going to use the inflate brush, BIN, to inflate things together so that you close that gap. And you can do this technique on other areas like, around here, and just to fill in some of the gaps, but don't overuse it. Otherwise, everything is going to be very blobby, unless that's what you want. All right, I'm going to start to think about the structure of the head. So if this is going to be the eye socket, then there's going to be some kind of like zygomatic arc here. I'm trying to humanize this creature a bit more. See, for example, this one right here, I think it's not adding anything to anything. So I'm just going to push it in. I'm not going to delete it or anything. I'm just going to push it in. Another thing that I think it's important to keep an eye on when you're working on this refinement is to look for a what I would call the flow of the lines, or make sure that you have harmonious lines going through. So I'm gonna just paint over here just to show you what I'm sort of looking for. So I have, and that's the reason why I removed that bit here at the top, because it didn't make sense. I'm starting to see these lines. And by the way, this is not something that I consciously designed when I was adding the pieces. This is something that as I refine, as I solve this problem in the chaos, it just gives me those ideas. So I go like, okay, I'm going to capitalize on this. I'm going to push this forward, right? So, this sort of flow, this is what I'm talking about, the flow. So you have some curves going in towards the center of the creature. Hopefully you can see those. And that's essentially what I'm trying to figure out or to fix when I pull and push the different objects. Same thing here. I haven't done much with this, but you should have like some kind of like flow into the body as well. So those are the type of things that I'm trying to refine, so that when you look at this creature and you look at this, whatever this is, it makes sense. You can identify certain features straight away. So it's almost like trying to create those visual cues that people or your audience would be more familiar to. And when I talk about visual cues, I just mean things that make sense in like two eyes. But if you want to have more eyes, you can. But it then immediately puts it into like sort of like the spider world or that sort of thing. Hopefully that makes sense. Right now, you are basically limited to the polygons that your pieces have. So I wouldn't worry about Dynamesh or anything. So if you look at let's say this piece right here, I'm just really stretching it, but I'm not Dynameshing anything. So okay. just keep working on a very low resolution. Concentrate on the volumes and the shapes. That's why I like to switch back to the flat version, and that will give me an idea like, okay, this doesn't look as good. I'm going to push it from here. Try to, almost like tweaking the volume without seeing the volume. Yeah. So yeah, that's why just try to keep the resolution based on whatever you created for the IMM brush. When we add the resolution, or when we add the Dynamesh later on tomorrow, that's more about the refinement of the sketch. But at this stage, just keep it very, very simple. You can keep refining things and refining things, but at some point you have to say, okay, that's enough. So like in this case, I would say a good rule of thumb is when you're comfortable with what you see with the design, and you go like, okay, I can see that this is something I can push forward. That's when the blockout is ready. At this point, I'm sort of happy with things, but there are a few things that I don't like. But I'm going to show you in just a second. I wouldn't say that this is ready yet, so I would like to have more iterations. I'm going to get it to a point that I'm sort of happy, and then I'm going to show you what the next step would be, and that maybe gives you an idea of when to decide when this is ready. One of the important things about this process as well is to be able to judge your own design and decide whether things are actually working or not. So for me, that piece here that is sort of like sticking out from the armpit of the creature is not adding anything. So I'm just gonna delete it. So you can do a couple of things. You can do what I usually do, which is like push it in. And when we dynamesh everything together, that's gonna disappear. Or you can just hold Control and Shift, select it, invert the selection, and then delete hidden. So I have a button here. So you can do that. I just find it easier. It sort of like keeps me within the design process or the design world when I just go ahead and push things in. But you can totally did what I just showed you. When you cannot figure out what character you're making, or you cannot see a creature or anything in your design, a really cool, easy thing to do is to tap into this idea that as humans we can recognize faces really easy, and especially on the eyes. I'm going to go to macro. I'm going to click on append eyes. So this is a macro that comes with ZBrush, or at least recent versions of ZBrush. And that is going to create another set, or like another tool right here. So it's separate from what we're distorting or changing. So it's a couple of eyes. I'm going to click on the local symmetry, bring in the gizmo, and I'm also going to give it a yellow eyes just so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to scale it down and place this. And based on where we place those eyes or those spheres, we have a completely different interpretation of the creature or whatever we're making. So this is something that we talk about in the first module of the Extra Mile about, because we go through a lot of 2D designs as well. So this is one of the concepts. So you can scale things up and then push them close together. And that gives you almost like a cartoony feel to it. Or you can make things really, really tiny and spread apart. That gives you a much more different rate of the character. But the point is, if you add some eyes, some spheres, or in the exercise of the Extra Mile, if you add a couple of dots when you're sketching, you immediately read you read the character a lot better. So you can definitely do that. For instance, in this one, I think it's pretty clear that the eyes are here because it has that sort of rounded shape, right? But if it didn't, if I push this, if it didn't have that, and I copy and paste those in here, you see where they are right now, they sort of like change the, it almost has like these sort of droopy eyes, right? It changed the read of the creature. If I put the eyes maybe on the side, then that's like a completely different insectoid creature. Or if I make them smaller. So you can definitely play with these. There we go. So that's a much more interesting thing. So you can definitely play with that idea of adding those dots. All right, so going back to this guy, I'm also going to turn on perspective so I can see this a bit more. The other thing that you can use, I'm going to push this thing in. I want to try to create some kind of like hollow area here for the mouth, because I think this guy has like the mouth open already. So I just need to figure out how these pieces here, maybe they're like some kind of tendons to open up the jaw somehow. So I'm going to stretch them out and again fill in spaces. But hopefully what I'm showing you in terms of the reasoning of what I'm trying to do here makes sense. It's a really fun technique, and I can guarantee you can make really unique concepts just like that. So it's a really fun warm up for other stuff that you might be doing, just to sort of get out of that sort of preconceived ideas that you might have from looking at other designs on the internet. One thing, another tip, I guess, is when you're using a move brush, any move brush, you can also change the back face masking. So for instance, if I want to add a little bit of, basically, let me just paint it. Sometimes, like I said, I tend to branch out, but if I want to fill in this gap, right? I can add a bunch of things in here, or I can add, or not a bunch of things. I can add an object in here, or I can add, inflate that, or I can just try to push this slowly just to fit it. But I don't want to mess with the front. So what you can do is go to the brush palette, go to the auto masking section here, and then you can click on back face mask. So if you click on that one, ZBrush is going to respect whatever is at the back, or the faces that are at the back of whatever you clicked on. So if I click on this one, if I click on this side, then it's going to respect the front. So that way, you see, I can push this like so. So that one is really, really handy because it will respect, let's say, for example, if I want to make this a single object, I can do this, and it's going to respect that. So this is probably one of the best little tricks I can share with you, so that you can deform pieces without affecting the rest. It is also a very handy tool when you're doing hard surface, just as a FYI. Keep things very, very basic, very low res, so you don't get the urge to start detailing things, because we're just focusing on silhouette, right? That's all we're doing here. At this point, I don't want to bring any anatomy reference, because that's not what the exercise is. I want to make sure that I have an interesting shape, an interesting creature, and then I worry a little bit more about how to make it more believable. So I definitely I'm definitely trying to create some reference, like some visual cues, like I said, about anatomy. So I have my sort of pectorials, let's say, in here. This could be some kind of like indication of a deltoid. So I'm definitely doing certain things. Like I said, this sort of flappy thing could be the trapezoid, or the trapezius. So it could be referencing things that you know, but just don't limit yourself to be like, okay, this has to be perfect. Because sometimes you might fall into the trap of there's this thing like a shrink wrapping your models to just the bones and the muscles, basically. So you end up with an écorché just to make sure that everything is, that you have all the muscles and everything. But there's a lot more interesting things when you start taking into account fat, and other things that make a real creature more believable. So yeah, don't limit yourself. It's definitely a very important thing, but that's why I chose this to be one of the topics for a workshop, because I think it really frees up the creative process. So you can create a lot of different things that look really interesting. All right, so I think I'm done in terms of playing around with the move topological. Now what I'm going to do is play with the move brush, just to make sure that my silhouette is worth exploring. So I think from the side view, I'm kind of like happy with this. I'm going to change this a little bit more, but the front view, it doesn't really match. Let me just show you. Oh, this is annoying. Anyway, you see the side view doesn't really match the front view. So the front view, you cannot really see what this thing is. So I'm going to try to generate some more angles and curvatures that sort of match the design from all sides. But that is done with the move brush. So not the move topological, but the move brush. I'm also going to select AccuCurve. And the cool thing about this is that obviously the move brush, the move topological will respect topology continuity. So that's why we can push little pieces around. But this one does it on the entire object. So I can very easily make these really large proportional changes fairly quick. So let's increase the length of the head backwards a bit. Maybe you can also mask things with the mask lasso and sort of soften that up. Select the gizmo and then maybe do something like that. I don't know. This is just more about exploring the silhouette, like I said, and try to make sure that it reads nicely from different angles. So I'm going to push maybe make the whole body a little bit more slender and stylize, like longer shapes for the torso. By the way, this also works for the full body characters, but for the sake of demo, we're going to try to keep this to a bust sort of creature. But like I said, once you design the head, everything else sort of like falls into place. I'm trying to also make this creature live within the same universe of the ones I've made. So similar head shape, but that also comes with your own style and with the preferences of the things that you like creating. So it's a bit of everything. I think I'm going to start, I'm going to leave it here, and I'll probably continue the refinement process. But this is pretty much what I will encourage you to do, just to continue to refine whatever sketch you currently have. And then we'll get into the rest of the design, which is more about volume, adding the details and everything else. Let me actually show you the comparison so that we can Shift S, and we started with, let's duplicate that. Hang on, let me just do a quick thing. So this is before, it's roughly here. Okay. So this is what we started with on the left-hand side. In fact, let's do it with this color. All right. So this is what you should end up with in this session, right? Something that you have, it gives you the starting point to refine this tomorrow and add the details and all of that. So you see on the left-hand side, we have chaos. We have just a bunch of random objects. So it is a problem to solve. And what we've done since then to what we have right now on the right-hand side is to try to filter down all that chaos to only the shapes and the forms that we like, and that we can see that could potentially be an interesting shape for a creature or for a character. So definitely, like I'm going for this sort of big creature with, and that was just like a suggestion on one of the shapes, right? Before I added the shape that looks like a big, I didn't see that. So that is one of the most exciting things about this technique, that you could be adding things so that you go like, oh yeah, that's all right. I don't see anything. But eventually you have a shape, maybe you scale it a bit longer or like a bit more than others, or maybe you added a tiny bit, or you're trying to capitalize on this happy accident, just trying to create the space to generate happy accidents in this chaos. And then we put on our designer hat to really ground the design and figuring out, okay, this works, this doesn't work. Let's strip out anything that doesn't and adjust anything that works to create something that is a bit more literal, a bit more like a creature. So this is the exercise. That's today's lesson, basically. So what we're going to be doing tomorrow is concentrate on the workflows that basically take a very rough block out like we have right now into a polished creature that then we can take into texturing and rendering, right? And again, these are I'm going to give you all the steps. I'm not going to skip anything. So tomorrow we're going to be doing that. We're just going to sketch. We're going to do the details. We're going to do Dynamesh. We're going to talk about all of these different workflows. So it's going to be more about sculpting rather than pulling and pushing things. So a lot more of the clay brush and that sort of thing. That's tomorrow. And let me just give you an example of the process that we're going to be aiming for tomorrow. And it is continuing this journey of designing. Like, it doesn't mean that whatever you have right now, all we're doing tomorrow is Dynamesh it and clean it. You can continue the refinement process all the way. So this is what we're going to be doing tomorrow. So let's say this is from my previous creature, right? So we're going to start dynameshing things, but there's a particular method that I'm going to share with you about dynameshing, and I think you're going to like it. So it's not the usual thing. Then we're going to clean things up. So this is going to be focusing on the transitions of volumes. And then we're going to add those really cool, interesting details. I'm going to show you different techniques, different brushes that you can use. That's the aim for tomorrow. So for now, what you should have is something like this. Don't rush it. Don't try to get ahead of yourself. Please make sure that you stick to the program. Believe me, I've tried this a few times, and I'm sure that if you follow the steps, it's actually going to be more beneficial. So as long as you have something like this, you're good to go. But I would encourage you as a homework to keep refining this a little bit more. Spend the time creating other pieces, other creatures. You see how easy this is, right? So just spend the time creating those other creatures, other variations, and then tomorrow you can decide, okay, this is the one that sort of speaks to me, that has the most potential out of the 3, 4, 5 that you create, and then we're going to move forward with those. So that is about it, guys. I'm going to stop my sharing of the screen.